How's it going? I want to teach y'all another lyricism technique today. It's going to be about um, basically how to switch up your words, and it's like looking at something that I can't really explain, but I can see it in my mind's eye, you know. But it's basically like you to come up with a perfect metaphor. There has to be a few. Like a few is three, and two is there's one, and then there's two, and then there's a few, which is three. When a baby has like a small amount of something, it can have one, two, or three. When something is really small and it barely fits in your hand and it's one, but it says that it's few because the baby is so big compared to like a normal size of a person. That would be few. And, and to me, three, two, and one is really one, and it's a stream, of only, one, it really is only one. One, two, and three is one. When you say, I have a few things to tell you, you only have one thing to tell. When you have two things to tell, you have two. And when you have one, you have one. But for some reason, if you zoom in and out and all that, and you say few, it's only one. So you have to have a quad. You have to have four. You have to have a few plus one words. And a few is one. And if you have four, you have more than three. So if you say I have many, you can actually choose between the few which you have, because you have an extra here. That means when you say you have a few, you can also have an alternate one on the end. Like if you had four things and you had like, okay, we have colors. We can use colors, we can use numbers. Really, we can use anything, but we'll just say we have colors. We have red, green, blue, violet. Okay, if we have a few colors to choose from, we only have three by principle. And they're all even to choose. You can pick either one. But if you have like more than that and you have an actual, like a pronounced few, then you have many. So any one of these can be switched out by this one. So, a few can then be, actual one, because if you have a few, it is not important that there is two or three. Because if you have a couple, it's two. But if you have a few, then you're not sure if it's three or four or five or 100, because it doesn't say. It says a few is three. Really, it's a diminishing amount. Two is definitely a couple. There is no difference between a few and a couple when there's just two. And if you have one, to me, one could be many, if it was said correctly. But technically, there has to be, four in order to explain correctly in our words. So when we have something to go across, to have a meaning to weave in order to learn how it works, you kind of have to have one parallel word that goes alongside while you have three interchanging words to create entertainment. So the words will change. And these are like kind of like weaving hairs. And for this, we're using 4 words to explain any of them. We have one base word, partial. Um, if it means anything to you, the first one I picked though was alternate, and then I said opposite, composite, and then partial. But I could have also emphasized just the partial. You want a strand where your words go all the way down and it just has what it says. Like if you have just the words that you mean, like the words, it goes in this one section. Then you're going to have the entertainers here, which is the few, which this will be swapped for any of them. Like, if there's there's like 3 cups and you can't see what's under them, and then there's like another cup over here that has the actual one, then, you can sit here and entertain yourself, but the real thing's going to be right there, and it has to be like you have to, like learning this it's definitely a mathematical problem because, a few is not individual, because a few is not individual is because a few it doesn't seem to be mathematically correct, but 4 and up seems to have a solidity. So in order for what you have to say to actually be eternal or stay, you have to be able to switch them in like that, and then it has to have room to skip the partial, or to emphasize the partial, which would be there. If it was skipped, then it would be really, really loud of a note, is the word partial. If you said every other word that was partial, like if you looked at your memory banks and you saw every word and every phrase that you have ever heard and put them all together, and you said everything but just partial, every single thing, all except for just partial, there will be an infinite strand right here of the opposite of non-partial, and it would be partial if partial was the one that you chose. Or it could be alternate, opposite, composite, or whatever word you pick. And you can also do this, by singling out, the 3 words that you can alternate with, which is a few words, which is enough to single out to get the word partial. And you can kind of look at that like you have a needle and thread, and it has one of the little divs in it, and it goes down, and then it comes out of the surface there. You know what I'm saying? And so I have alternate, opposite, and composite. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create a mistake, accident. We're trying to make an error happen by having you stumble over the words, is what poetry is about. So when you say this, here's the first row, and they all have to have a row when you say the rhyme scheme. In order for the real one to stay here, it has to have shit pass through it, so it has a from and a to, so that it stays. As long as you exclude what is needed, and then you make it clear that that's what was supposed to be there. It's like when you go knock, 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 and then it has to go bump, somewhere it'll have to do it. You have to make it apparent that you have to make that be able to you have to make that happen. You got to have the ability to do that. So then we have alternate, opposite, composite, and then we would have composite, opposite, alternate, And anyway, how the math works is that we would go all the way through all these. We have 3 times 3 is 9. So we know that we'd have, alternate, opposite, composite, beep, opposite, and then it would just keep going through, opposite. Then it would say, opposite, beep, this, it'd probably be like 9 or 12, or 3 times 3 is 9. I know that, but, it'd have to have 9 times 3 is 27. You'd have a lot of them, but there'd have to be these little blanks, and then you have to find the partial, Anyway, you'd have to have a way for those to pop out. And then that way it will have the partial will pop out. Having 4 choices of words to do it with, you know, like, I guess you could do it kind of like picking basketball players. You could say like alternate, opposite, composite, and partial. And then at this one, you put the composite and partial in this one, is another way to do it. That way it has 2 inside of it. Then when it comes around and it picks partial, it says composite and partial, it could be composite or partial, and both of them would want to play. But it would make sure that when you have that frame open, that that these 2 words will not go skipped, because if you say composite and partial, or if you say like slightly and targeted, which goes adava and other, you know, which is 2 different ones, then it will be able to fill in that spot. And then that way you're not going to have any loss. And see, it can't have one without the other because they'd have to be in the thing. You know, so you'd have to have partial and composite, you know, is the other way to look at it. That way, you know, when you single one out and you put partial there, it'll want composite and partial. So it'll have to look for that, and it'll find composite and partial and then put them back in there. So it will eventually, you know, not lose any of the format. And another way to look at it is like we have some dots here. It's like we have one word here, you could say, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words here. You know, or phrases. They can be the same. They should all be about the same amount of syllable. They should be the same on each one. You know, and you can see, you know, here we're looking at like the diagonals of it, and how, you know, this can go down, and, you know, this only has 1, but it stops right here. You know, so it would have a little pop error here. You know, when it goes 1, 2, 3, it'd say 4, but it would still have this one. So while you're swapping all these out, it has to have 1 to stare at the whole time, this one. You know, so when you have your words that you're talking about, it should have 1 word that is like an anchor or an eternal word while you swap these out when you're rhyming. So when you're using other words that rhyme with other words, there's still this one here that is at the pop area, you know. And the other thing is, I was going to use a bunch of words. I didn't finish it yet, but one was going to be housing and home, like describing a house, housing, home. All of these would say housing, home, but they'd have to have something else and be distinguished from that, you know, which would have to have rhyming. I put some lounging, could be here, couch and room could be here, housing, home, some lounging, lounging some. See what I mean? Lounging some lounge. You know, I wouldn't put a jing here, you know. Some lounging, you know, if it can be predicted, is basically this formula is that when something is coming this way and then it finds it and then it goes bing and then it knows that it's there, you know, then it knows that it's there, you know. So, you know, you have to be able to kind of make as much space for that as you can. Like if there was something and then it's almost there, you know, you have to have something that is like be able to predict it's there, you know, that sounds slightly abstract. It has to have everything else but that there, you know, so it has room to kind of grow and be apparent, you know. But what I was saying with this was not just the 1 syllable. You can do it with 1 syllable and mix them in and weave them. And, you know, that's a good rule, is that this perfect, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, 1 of 1, and then 2 here of 2, and then 3 here and 3 here. And then the 4 is going to be the 1. You know, is how that works. And then we have some lounging, couch in room, couchy room, slouchy zone, outside view, zone, outside view. Not like that, but I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do this easy learning thingy, but, I need to come up with, I have 1, 2, some lounging, couch in room, slouchy zone, outside view. I need one more here and I need 2 more here. And it's going to be housing and home is going to be what's trying to make it in there. Housing, home, because that's where I'm trying to look at and trying to figure it out. So then we'd have to make 2 more that say housing and home. And if you say housing and home on every single try until it gets it, then it will get it, and then it will know that the housing and the home, is a new word. Because if you fill in every single word with housing and home, it will have layers over it. It's like if you say housing and home, housing, home, and then you say fire hydrant. You know that hydrant layers over housing. Housing, hydrant, drowsy, drowsy, fire and home, fire and home, like fire, you wouldn't say fire, drowsy, fire, home, say from, drowsy from, and then, we have couch and room, drowsy from, because drowsy from, housing, home, fire, hydrant, outside view, fire. And these have to, each one of these has to have an itch in it that makes you itch, like, so they don't touch. So it has to have, some lounging, couch and room. When it overlaps, when you have a bag of chips, the bag of chips will kind of make your mouth itch. Or if you have nothing to drink, your mouth gets real pasty, or it feels, itchy, makes you itch. You say scratch and then you say lotion, and then it makes your head itch because you don't have any lotion and you want to find it. That's because it's trying to reproduce these words and try to figure out how to separate. So when you have these 3 different things, this should be the remedy, is the housing home being said, should be the remedy for these 3 words. And then these 3 words should all be like, for example, like housing and home, it being said, you say the phrase one time and it's heard, it sounds good to hear it. But these, are going to be housing home, but it's going to be housing home with something else that is different from each other. So these 2 are the same. These 2 will affect me the same. If I say like ocean and wave, I know that if I emphasize it correctly, that these 2 words, ocean and wave, would be blue, and that would remind me of water. And then since there's water, I'd have to have something that would make me itch, so I'd want to wash my hands or, bathe, take a shower, or take a bath or go swimming. I'd have to have, I could use chips and words like that to go in here. And then, or, bagel or, fries, grease, anything like that. And then over here, we would have something else that would be different than those 2 other places that you'd have to reproduce to get to this spot, from an area. That way when you're not paying attention and you don't know this language, that you were still picking it up because you don't know what it means, because few is something that we are working on right now as, humans, is that few is not an actual absolute number, even though it is 3. Properly, it cannot really mathematically be, any less or more than 1, because few is an amount, which would be 1, even though a few can be 3. So, figure that out. And so then we have drowsy, couchy room, slouchy zone, drowsy from is in these three, and then we have outside view, which I can't even say unless I'm looking from another room, like outside in, or something, looking out a window now. And it should be able to make you choke up. You got to have barriers on these words. Like these, it has to be something interesting over here that you stay looking at, and you be like, I want to look at this forever. You say it like that, is what that is. And then you weave that in with one that does, I want to look at it forever and look at it forever. And then there's the one channel, which is like your safe zone. That's going to be the actual message that's needed. That's going to be like, that is the lifeline, of the thing, So, being able to switch these things in and weave them in is really important. These other two words, I could give you homework and say, when you say housing home, how could you come up with the next two of these words, that would fit in here? And then when those are in there, you can try to figure out outside view. You could say, housing home, outside view. It's got to be able to go in one line. It's like like just using your nose only to talk, like mouthing it all, like until it makes the obstacle there. This obstacle is not the obstacle. It'd be these obstacles that are distinguished from the three of each other. That would mix in. And then you would notice that the relief is that word here. That relief is going to be the easy clear all, the thing that you can see, it's like the freshman, the air, the fresh. So, couchy room, slouchy zone, sounds like beanbag chair, but beanbag chair and outside view is not really the same, but you have to get all these words to where that thing, like the preemptive, has to wait and then almost consume it. And then when it almost gets it right, it'll have so much of these overwhelming words that it will make it itch and all that. And then when it gets to that point, housing home is going to be understandable. Because it's going to be crushed with, you'll be like, this is what it takes for me to see, for you to get squished. When I say some lounging, couchy room, slouchy zone, beanbag chair, drowsy from, outside view, housing home, until it has to hear, wants to find another word besides housing home. Because every single one of these is supposed to be, when you say some lounging and then you go to couch and room, it's not supposed to separate, and say separate, it's supposed to say housing home, like it's supposed to have the same movement in the rhythm, like housing home. Then you replay it and it sounds exactly the same. Housing home. Instead of like how I just tried to sound and it sounded like two. You want it to sound like one and then so many that it has overwhelming amount. And then it will have to split off and make the one what it was before so it can finally chill out, So that's how, to make your music the most potent and most understandable, like to make you excited. When you're like listening to something, you want it to trip you out, get you excited, and you want something that's going to stay meaningful. It's good to say one thing all the way through and then have things to mix it up on the sides. So you could write a whole rhyme and then, or you could write a whole rhyme and then you could write three more rhymes and then you could lace them in like this. You could say alternate, could be like one whole set of rhymes. You could have 30 words that say alternate, 30 words that say opposite, 30 words that say composite, and 30 words that say partial. And then you can say partial, composite, alternate, and opposite is 1, 2, 3, and 4. When you mix them like that, it has to have a way to cross mix in between them and to where it doesn't lose any of the information on which one was 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then when you said 1, 2, 3, and 4 again, that you can say 1, 3, 2, and 4, and 4, 3, 1, and 2, and 2, 1, 3, and 4, all the way through. So you have to be able to mix it all the way in. And this is your give or take. Like when you say, you can have a few of something. When you say you can have like overwhelming amount, is 4. It's not 3. Is the math of that. If you have, enough of something like, okay, when you get excited, all that is what we're looking for here to make good music. You just have to know that 4 is actually more than 1. When there's 3, which means few, 2 means couple, and 1 just means one. You have to have more. You have to have the overwhelming amount, which is the number 4. So when you have this many words to choose from, and then you use these, this will become exciting to almost say it, because it's coming. The partial is coming when you say the alternate, opposite, and composite. And then you switch them all in, so you said all of them, except for the partial. And then the partial, will, be the overwhelmness of, when you get high and you want to eat some really good food, and, it's just so good. And it's just the perfect recipe. And you're like, man, I want to go to this restaurant. It's because you could pick from this many restaurants. It's because you could pick from 4, but 3 was only how many you could choose. It's, because 3 is 1, but 4 is, more than 3, which is more than 1, but it's just like too much, So the math of that, is the whole magic behind how music sounds good and doesn't, is because of that. It's why going to one restaurant is good, and it's why going to like another restaurant is like not needed right now. And you have to have enough of the not needed. So you have to have 3 choices, and then you have to have a 4th one. It's just like A, B, C, and D. When you're looking at, like a multiple choice, there's still those 3 clues there, and then you pick one. But it's not that. It's just that when you need a refresher, just like look over this and kind of see what I'm talking about. But I promise you, you will have the dopest, laced lyrics and rhymes if you just follow this at all and think that it looks like something that is mathematical. I swear to God, this shit is mathematical. And you will definitely enjoy going over this. So please, maybe we can come up with how this could be math. I think it's algebra, but I promise this is it. This is why something is awesome that is talked about. It's just because the fact that there's only one thing, but there's actually, this is the whole excitement formula. It's not like it's Einstein, but I promise it is. It explains everything. You know what I'm saying? It explains reproduction. It explains, and then we have over here, 3 and then 1. And I don't know why I did that. I just kind of entertained myself, but 1's going here. All of these are going to this 1. I don't think that's right. This one is just this one moving. So it's just like there's 1 here that is not noticed. Maybe that's it. And then there's all this other shit. It's like this is the main thing, and then there's all this other shit. And it's just one thing. I know that doesn't really seem that amazing, but, like if you show people a bunch of shit and then you just have one thing there the whole time, it is shocking and it is amazing. And understanding the math of that, you should be able to make the hottest music. So figure it out.